though there might be some later evidence that comes along and disproves it. It's kind of sometimes people, just because they're arguing and they don't want to like use kind of 2 or 3.
Well, I would say the public believe there's a difference between the way that science is pursued and the way it's perceived.
Yeah.
I would say the pursuers, people who are involved in science, people who read up on science, they know this is true. They know science can change.
Yeah.
But the average people in the public, for them, is gospel truth.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can't be a doubting Thomas. You have to, fit the line.
Yeah, you're right. But getting back to, I think it was like whether evolution can create rational thinking species, even though kind of evolution's kind of the thing that works for evolution is simply kind of whether there are more copies of the gene and whether like your species is more populous and is able to survive well
gene
enough
frequencies.
Yeah. So, but like I think kind of have we now agreed that just because evolution could create a species which wasn't able to think properly doesn't mean that doesn't mean that we have to discount evolution for us, because evolution could create.
What do you mean by discount? Do you mean we can't accept it as a working model, or do you mean it's not true in an absolute sense?
I'm not sure which one you meant.
What I meant is it's not true in an absolute sense, and secondly, I still don't have a problem with accepting Darwinian evolution as a working model, because me and you both understand, just because something has an anomaly, has some data which doesn't fit, it doesn't mean you throw away the model.
Yeah. So
because all scientific theories can't explain all the data.
So like when you say it's not true in an absolute sense, are you asserting that it is untrue in an sorry, wait a second. Okay.
Deep breath.
What I'm wondering is, like, I feel like kind of we were talking about whether humans could think rationally or not, according to if they evolved, and what was the argument that they couldn't have developed the ability to think rationally?
Okay, look, the best way to sort of summarize this is there's a philosopher of science named Thomas Nagel. He's written a book called Mind and Cosmos, right? And this is mainstream stuff. His book is published by Oxford University. And what he basically argues in that book is we have our ability to reason rationally and we can trust our reason. But what he argues is, and he's an atheist by the way, he argues if natural selection created us, mind and body, like it's claimed by neo-Darwinists.
Can I just say, when you say natural selection, would we be able to replace that with natural selection and Lamarckian, so like the cutting edge of what we think about?
Okay. Let me explain that. So he believes when it comes to Darwinism, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, he says it doesn't explain it, and this is why he believes it's false. But your question, what if we combine Darwinian evolution with epigenetics, with maybe some other things?
Yeah, which is what
I believe we can. I believe we can.
Well, like biologists and geneticists do as well.
I believe we can, but not from a naturalistic point of view.
What do you mean by a naturalistic?
A naturalistic point of view is to believe that all that exists is matter and energy.
So what is this about saying that yes, it's true that kind of epigenetics happens where like whether or not a gene is turned on can be passed on to our father and son, as well as kind of but there's also the phenomena where kind of a selection pressure will kind of wipe out all the members of a species which don't have some traits, and then that trait will become more populous in the next generation, which is like a natural selection. What about kind of accepting both models, which there is kind of evidence for it occurring? What about that violates kind of naturalism?
Okay. The first thing to know is that you can take natural selection and make it into a tertiary force, not a primary force. And you can say we have evolution by natural genetic engineering, we have Lamarckian evolution, we have mutational evolution, we have self-organizational evolution, and we have symbiotic evolution. And all you do with natural selection is you make it into a trimming force. So like a trimming force.
Okay.
So you can make it and you can say that natural selection explains the survival of the fittest, but not the arrival of the fittest. So it can explain why the unfittest dies, but it cannot explain the origin of new body forms. It cannot explain the origin of new metabolic pathways. It can't explain these things. And the problem that Thomas Nagel has with Darwinian evolution is purely mechanistic, is purely materialistic. It starts off with, we're going to explain everything in a purely naturalistic way. The other views, the other forms, they don't start off from that premise. There is still some theistic implications of those models, even though the proponents of those models are all atheists.
Okay, so
that's where naturalism comes in.
What is theistic about epigenetics? What is theistic about epigenetics?
When it comes to epigenetical information, which is being a cause for phenotypic traits, right? Which is according to environmental stimuli. There is a communication between the cells, and there is an intelligence in that process. It is not as simple as, and this is, I'm just going to compare the two. One worldview, we have cells which you can imagine to be dumb robots from the neo-Darwinian point of view, which are constantly replicating, and as they're replicating, they have mistakes in the DNA sequence. And as you have those mistakes, you have an accumulation of those mistakes until they become adaptive, and then they're selected for. Correct? So it's purely naturalistic.
No, it doesn't sound like you're talking about epigenetics.
No. I'm talking about Darwinism. Now I'm going to compare it with epigenetics. Okay. Epigenetics, we have something which is irreducibly complex. We have an intricate system which is not purely based upon genetics. We have epigenetic information working with genetic information. And you can't start off with the idea that the first cell was just a self-replicating molecule, and as you kept making mistakes, you kept getting new and new phenotypic traits.
Yeah, but epigenetics doesn't seek to explain the entire kind of all kind of biodiversity that we see in the world today.
Epigenetics doesn't, but Lamarckism does.
Okay, so that's why there's probably Lamarckism isn't like.
Yeah, sorry, my mistake. Neo-Lamarckism. Lamarckism, what Jean-Baptiste Lamarck came up with, that's about 200 years old. Right? Neo-Lamarckism is very new. There's just a book published, Transformations of Lamarckism by MIT Press, MIT University, and in that Eva Jablanka and another author, I forgot her name, she basically, what they're arguing for is a complete paradigm shift, because when you look at the fossil record, it's open to interpretation, and one of the interpretations which is made by them is there's a lot of saltations, there's a lot of rapid evolutionary change. Now, people like Darwin and the neo-Darwinists, they said, no, it's gradualism. So what they'd say is that these saltational processes were led by Lamarckian transformations, this sort of thing, right? Now, there's a clear difference between these two. There might be a difference between these two paradigms. Naturalism has a big problem when it comes to when it's combined with Darwinism, because then what happens is you shut off some of its switches for its explanatory power. If I was to say, Ken Miller, I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He's an evolutionary biologist who's a Darwinist, but he believes in God as well. According to him, there's not really that many problems, because what he can do is he can accept God and he can accept Darwinian evolution, and then where there's problems with naturalism, he can say there's consciousness, there's mind, which is what Thomas Nagel speaks about, because we don't believe in naturalism, he believes in God. You see, but under a naturalistic worldview, and this again is not according to me, this is according to mainstream secular atheist academics, there is a big problem.